Today we will be discussing about metabolism of carbohydrates. Okay, so carbohydrates act as a major source of energy for living organisms. Okay, and glucose is the central molecule in carbohydrate metabolism, since all the carbohydrates, they are either hydrolyzed or isomerized into glucose during metabolism. Okay, so mostly we consume carbohydrates in the form of starch. Okay, or we take carbohydrate in the form of lactose. Okay, so starch, they will get hydrolyzed into glucose. Okay, starch they are made up of glucose. They are the polymers of glucose. So after digestion they will be hydrolyzed into glucose, and other monosaccharides, okay, for example fructose, galactose, they will also be converted into glucose. They will be also isomerized into glucose. So basically glucose is the one, okay, glucose is the major carbohydrate, okay, which is acting as a source of energy, or which is undergoing a important role or important role in the carbohydrate metabolism. Okay, so now before starting the metabolism of carbohydrate, okay, first let's see how carbohydrates are digested and how they are absorbed from intestine into the circulation, blood capillaries, then into the tissues. Okay, so digestion of carbohydrate starts from mouth by the action of salivary alpha amylase. Okay, but this action is transient, since food stays in mouth for a short period of time. Okay, and also this salivary amylase is inhibited by gastric HCl, which is secreted by the stomach upon the entry of food. Okay, so further digestion occurs in the intestine by the action of enzymes present in the pancreatic and intestinal juice. So pancreatic juice, it contains an enzyme known as pancreatic alpha amylase, okay, which hydrolyzes alpha 1,4 glycosidic linkages randomly, and then it produces smaller subunits like maltose, isomaltose, dextrins, etc. Okay, and intestinal juice, also known as succus entericus, okay, it contains these many enzymes. Okay, it contains sucrase that hydrolyze sucrose into glucose and fructose. Okay, similarly it contains lactase, which hydrolyze lactose into glucose and galactose. Okay, similarly there is maltase, which hydrolyze maltose into glucose and glucose, or 2 glucose units. So eventually all the carbohydrates, they are converted into the monosaccharides. And they are absorbed into the circulation. Okay, so let's see how absorption of carbohydrates takes place. Okay, so this is your lumen. Okay, this is the intestinal lumen. Okay, and this is your intestinal mucosal cells, and then this is your capillaries. Okay, so what happens? Food or our carbohydrate monosaccharides, after digestion they remain in the lumen of the intestine. From lumen they are absorbed into the mucosal cells, and from mucosal cells they are again absorbed into the blood capillaries. So let's see how glucose or other monosaccharides, they are transported, okay, across these mucosal cells. So first of all, glucose is transported from lumen into the mucosal cells, okay, by the help of a transporter known as sodium glucose transporter, SGLT1. It is a co-transport system. For one molecule of glucose to be transported, okay, there will be one molecule of Na plus. Okay, I mean to say glucose and sodium ion, okay, they get co-transported together. For the entry of one molecule of glucose, there need to be entry of one Na plus ion. Okay, so this is your sodium glucose transporter 1. And fructose, it transports through GLUT5. GLUT5 stands for glucose transporter 5. Okay, fructose is transported by this transporter, that is GLUT5. Okay, and glucose as well as galactose is transported by SGLT1, sodium glucose transporter 1. Okay, now there is a problem when glucose is transported. When, as you see, when glucose is transported, there is a transport of 1 Na plus ion. And if you know electrolytic balance, this is the mucosal cell. Okay, so the inside mucosal cell, the concentration of Na plus rises, which is not a physiologically favorable condition for the cell. Physiologically, what happens? There is low concentration of Na plus inside the cell. There is high concentration of Na plus outside the cell. So for the entry of glucose, there is extra entry of this Na plus ion, and that needs to be transported. Okay, and that needs to be transported. So it is transported by this pump known as sodium potassium pump. It transports 3 sodium plus, okay, 3 sodium plus out of the cell, and it brings 2 potassium ion inside the cell. Okay, and it also requires energy, which is provided by the hydrolysis of ATP, okay, into ADP and PI. Okay, this transport is facilitated by energy provided from hydrolysis of ATP. Okay, in that sense, we can say that this transport of glucose is an active transport, because for the entry of glucose there is entry of Na plus, and to remove Na plus we need this Na plus K plus pump, sodium potassium pump, which uses ATP. Okay, therefore we can say glucose transport, okay, or entry of glucose from the luminal side to the mucosal cells, it requires energy. Okay, now after this glucose has been transported into mucosal cell, similarly fructose has been transported into mucosal cell. Similarly, galactose will also be transported by the same method, that is by the same transporter SGLT1. Okay, and then from the mucosal cell they move towards the capillary. Okay, they move towards the blood capillaries by this transporter, that is known as GLUT2. Okay, this is known as GLUT2, that is glucose transporter 2, okay, which transports all these monosaccharides, glucose, galactose, fructose, across the mucosal cell. So there are at least 6 types of glucose transporters. Okay, glucose transporters 1 to 5 and 7, including this SGLT. There are 7 types of glucose transporter: SGLT1, then GLUT transporter 1 to 5, and GLUT transporter 7. Okay, thank you.